Welcome to the deep dive. Today we'll be venturing deep into Plato's Allegory of the Cave.
Ah, classic.
It really is, and it's stood the test of time, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Even today, it still offers incredible insights into the human condition and how we perceive reality.
Right. And for those who may need a quick refresher, the allegory depicts, prisoners chained in a cave, and their whole lives they've just been looking at shadows on the wall.
Taking those shadows as reality. Yeah. And
Exactly.
one prisoner escapes, sees the real world, and then, tries to tell the others.
But of course they don't believe him.
Not at all. They think he's gone mad.
That part always gets me. So let's get into it. In today's world, what does it actually mean to have a cave?
Well, it's about recognizing that each of us kind of operates within certain mental frameworks or caves, as Plato puts it. These frameworks shape how we see things.
Okay, I'm following. These caves are formed by what? Our upbringing, our culture.
Exactly. And also things like our belief systems,
Yeah.
the people we surround ourselves with, even, the algorithms that feed us information online these days.
It's like we're all looking at the world through these different lenses, and those lenses can distort the full picture, right?
That's a great way to put it. And one of the biggest challenges is that we might not even realize we're trapped in a cave.
So how do we know if we're just seeing shadows and not the real thing? What are some red flags?
One telltale sign.
Yeah,
Um, if you're constantly surrounded by information that just confirms your existing beliefs, well,
that's a problem.
yeah, you might be in what we call an echo chamber. It's like a modern day cave where, you rarely hear dissenting voices.
Right, like we've built these comfortable little bubbles around ourselves to avoid, uncomfortable truths or different opinions. The source material we were looking at had this interesting anecdote about uh, missionary kids.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Some of them who had grown up in a very sheltered environment, they experienced like culture shock when they had to, transition into a more diverse world.
it makes sense.
It's almost as if their cave was suddenly shattered.
Exactly. It really highlights how having limited exposure to different perspectives can make you, well, vulnerable to shock when you encounter new ideas and beliefs.
That's a good point. It makes me wonder, does the internet, for all its wonders, actually contribute to the creation of these new, like, super personalized caves?
That's a fascinating question. On one hand, the internet has given us access to more information than ever before.
Right, which is amazing.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, those algorithms that are supposed to personalize our online experience can also inadvertently create these echo chambers where we're only exposed to information that already aligns with our existing preferences.
Like it's filtering out anything that might challenge our views.
Exactly. And it can have a really big impact, especially in areas like politics.
Because
Well, think about it. Both liberals and conservatives can end up trapped in these information bubbles online, which just deepens the divide between them,
it makes it harder to have productive conversations.
for sure. So, yeah, the internet's a double-edged sword when it comes to those cave tendencies.
It has the power to both free us and imprison us. So if we're all susceptible to these cave tendencies, what can we actually do about it?
Well, the first step is to recognize that we are not just passive consumers of information. We have the power to choose what we expose ourselves to.
Okay.
We can actively seek out diverse perspectives, challenge our own assumptions, and really engage in critical thinking.
So it's about being more mindful about the sources we trust and making a conscious effort to expose ourselves to different viewpoints.
That's a great way to put it. It's about taking control of our own information diet, so to
Yeah,
speak.
I like that. But Plato himself actually described the journey out of the cave as, well, kind of painful. There's that passage where he talks about, sharp pains and a blinding glare when encountering new realities.
Yeah, it's not always easy, that's for sure.
And I can imagine that's pretty accurate, right? Like confronting deeply held beliefs, especially when they're tied to our identity, it can be really tough.
It can be, absolutely. But, it's a bit like exercising a muscle that you haven't used in a while. It might ache at first, but it's essential for growth.
I see what you mean. So if it's so challenging, why even bother? What's the upside to all this?
Well, think about it this way. As we break free from those limited perspectives, we open ourselves up to a whole world of new possibilities, new beauty.
A whole new way of seeing things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we develop a deeper understanding, not just of the world, but of ourselves. We become more compassionate, more tolerant, more equipped to make a positive impact.
That's a compelling argument for sure, but I imagine it's not always easy to bring others along on this journey, right?
It can be tough. Some people are perfectly content with their shadows and resistant to seeing anything else.
So how do we approach those conversations? Should we even try?
I think it's important to remember that people who are still in their caves aren't choosing to be ignorant. They're operating within the limitations of their experience, the information they've been exposed to.
So it's not about judging them or trying to force our beliefs on them. It's more about creating a space for like open and honest dialogue.
Exactly, where different perspectives can be shared and explored, respectfully.
It's about planting seeds of curiosity, right? Maybe gently nudging them towards the entrance of the cave.
I like that analogy. And who knows, maybe they'll get curious enough to peek outside on their own.
Okay, so approach those conversations with empathy and understanding. But what if someone's just like completely unwilling to even consider another perspective?
It happens. And honestly, you need to be realistic about your expectations.
Yeah.
You can't force anyone to change their mind, right?
True. So what do we do then? Just accept that some people will always be in their caves.
Well, I wouldn't say give up entirely. Maybe the best you can do is plant that seed of doubt. Maybe down the road, that seed grows into a question, and that question leads them out of the cave on their own.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sometimes just shining your own light brightly can inspire others to do the same.
To seek out their own truths.
Exactly. It's about leading by example. Now, the source material also mentions that the escaped prisoner was actually afraid to go back to the cave.
Oh, right.
He knew they wouldn't believe him, might even harm him for trying to share what he'd seen.
Fear can be a powerful obstacle to, well, to just about anything. And definitely to this idea of enlightenment.
It's a powerful force. It keeps us in our comfort zone, stops us from speaking our truth, even when we know there's something more out there.
So how do we overcome that fear? How do we step into the light, even when it feels scary?
It takes courage
Yeah.
and resilience. We need to be willing to face those fears head on, to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's difficult.
Where does that courage come from?
It can come from different places.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes from, believing in something bigger than yourself. Or maybe it comes from surrounding yourself with supportive people.
Your community.
Right? Or sometimes just knowing you're doing the right thing can be enough. But even when we muster the courage to step out of the caves, there are still adjustments to be made, right?
What kinds of adjustment?
Well, just imagine those prisoners emerging from the cave after a lifetime of darkness.
Yeah.
They'd be blinded by the sunlight, right?
It takes time to adjust.
Exactly. And it's the same with stepping into a new way of thinking. It takes time for our minds to adjust to that brighter light of knowledge and truth.
Oh, I see. So we might feel overwhelmed or disoriented at first as we try to process all these new perspectives.
That's completely normal. Be patient with yourself. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't go from seeing shadows to understanding the whole picture in a flash. It takes time and effort.
And the willingness to embrace that discomfort that comes with growth.
Yes, you said it.
Yeah.
But it's not just about internal adjustments, right? There's also the reactions of others to consider.
Ah, you mean how the escaped prisoner was met with disbelief and even ridicule when he tried to tell the others what he'd seen?
Exactly. And it's true in life, too. Sometimes when you share your new insights with others, they don't take it well. They might feel threatened by it. Or maybe they're just too comfortable in their own caves to venture out.
So we might face pushback, even anger, from those who are clinging to their shadows.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And it can be tough to deal with. You have to remember that you can't control how other people react. You can only control your own response.
Respond with empathy.
Yes. You can try to engage in a respectful dialogue, explain your point of view. But at the end of the day, you have to accept that not everyone's ready to listen.
It's their choice.
It is. And maybe, by continuing to shine your light, you might inspire them to take a look around eventually.
It's a hopeful thought.
No.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges of stepping out of the cave, but I'm curious about the rewards. What are some of the positive outcomes of embracing this journey of enlightenment?
Oh, the rewards are numerous. Think about it. As we break free from those limited perspectives, we open ourselves up to a world of wonder and possibility. We develop a deeper understanding of ourselves, our relationships, everything.
The world becomes a much richer, more vibrant place.
Exactly. It's like seeing the world in full color for the first time. We start to appreciate the nuances, the complexity.
And we become more compassionate, more understanding.
You got it. As we shed those limiting beliefs, we become more connected to the world around us and to each other. But I have to be honest, even when we step out of that cave, it's not always sunshine and roses, is it? Are there still challenges ahead? Of course, there are always challenges. That's just part of life, right? And one of the biggest challenges we might face is a sense of disillusionment.
Disillusionment. In what way?
Well, as we become more aware of the world, of its complexities and its injustices, it can be disheartening. We start to see how much work there is to do to create a more just and equitable society and can feel overwhelming.
It's like realizing how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Exactly. It's okay to feel those things. Don't try to suppress them. Those feelings, that sense of grief, even anger, they're valid.
Yeah.
And you know what? They can be a powerful motivator for change.
So it's about channeling those emotions into something positive, right?
Exactly. And this is where having a community becomes so important. We don't have to go through this alone.
You need those people who understand what you're going through.
Exactly. You need your fellow cave escapees to support you and encourage you along the way. But speaking of those who are still in the cave, do we have a responsibility to try to enlighten them? Or is it better to let them find their own way?
That's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. On one hand, it's natural to want to share what we've learned, right? But on the other hand, we have to respect people's autonomy, their right to choose their own path.
So it's not about forcing our beliefs on them.
Not at all. It's more about creating a space where they might feel curious enough to explore different perspectives on their own. You can't force anyone to see the light, but you can certainly shine it brightly enough that it's hard to ignore.
I love that. And maybe, just maybe, by living our truths authentically, we can inspire others to question the shadows they've been clinging to.
That's the hope, isn't it?
It is. Now, when we come back after the break, we'll be diving deeper into how Plato's allegory can be applied to specific issues in the modern world, from the internet and social media to materialism and the pursuit of happiness. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were talking about, those personal challenges and the rewards of escaping our own metaphorical caves. Now, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about how this allegory applies to some specific issues we're facing today. Like, for example, the internet. Is it a tool for enlightenment, or is it actually a trap that's keeping us, chained to our own biases?
That's a big question, isn't it? And I don't think there's an easy answer. The internet, it's this incredible source of information. It connects us to people all over the world, exposes us to different perspectives.
We couldn't do this show without it.
Exactly. But there's a flip side to it, too.
Mm-hmm.
We've got these algorithms that are designed to, personalize our online experiences.
Make it more relevant to us. Yeah, and they can end up creating these echo chambers where we only see information that reinforces what we already believe. It's almost like
those shadows on the cave wall.
Exactly. And we end up thinking that those shadows are the whole truth. It's these filter bubbles, as they're called, that can really lead us down that rabbit hole of confirmation bias.
Where we're only seeking out information that, confirms what we already think.
Right. And that can make it really, really difficult to have, meaningful conversations with people who have different opinions. And it makes it hard to find common ground.
That brings to mind this concept of intellectual humility, which we talked about a bit in our prep. Being aware that we don't have all the answers, that our perspectives are limited.
That's so important.
It seems like, especially in this online world, that intellectual humility is essential.
It really is. It allows us to approach new information with, a healthy dose of skepticism, to question our own assumptions, to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Because we could be.
Absolutely. Without that intellectual humility, we're just stuck in our own biases, unable to see beyond those shadows.
So even if we're working on our intellectual humility, even if we're aware of our own biases, how do we break free from those filter bubbles? Where do we even begin?
One practical step is to be more proactive about diversifying our information sources.
Meaning?
Well, don't just rely on those algorithms to feed you everything.
Right.
Actively seek out alternative viewpoints. Read articles from sources you wouldn't normally read. Engage with people who have different opinions. It's a challenge, for sure.
It is, but it's important.
It is.
But how do we do that in a way that feels genuine? Not just like we're checking off boxes on a diversity checklist.
I think it comes down to curiosity. Approach those interactions with a genuine desire to learn and understand, not just to prove your point, but to really listen to what other people have to say.
See things from their perspective.
Exactly. And maybe even try to, understand why they believe what they believe. Ask questions. Be open to new information.
Yeah. It's almost like becoming an intellectual explorer, right? Venturing out into those unknown territories of different opinions and beliefs.
I love that analogy. And just like any explorer, you got to be prepared for the challenges that come with it. You might encounter resistance, maybe even some conflict along the way. But that's how we learn and grow.
It's how we expand our understanding of the world. Something else that stood out to me from the source material was how Plato didn't just focus on like intellectual knowledge, but he also talked about the role of our physical experiences and our emotions
Oh, yeah.
and how those things shape our understanding of reality. So how does that apply to our digital lives?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really easy to get sucked into that online world and forget that, true knowledge isn't just about absorbing information passively. We need to engage with the world around us, you know, to use all of our senses.
To get out there.
Yes. To experience different cultures, to have those real-life interactions with people.
To feel things.
Exactly. So, yes, what we see on our screens is important, but it can't be the only source of our knowledge. We need to find that balance between our digital lives and our physical experiences. Step away from the screen, engage with our communities, and really allow ourselves to be transformed by the real world.
That's a great reminder because it's easy to lose sight of that, especially in today's world. Another shadow that Plato talks about in the Allegory is this idea of pursuing material possessions as a path to happiness. And man, it feels like we're living in a culture that's obsessed with stuff. Status symbols, external validation, it's everywhere.
It's hard to escape, for sure.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us we need more, more, more. A bigger house, a fancier car, the latest gadget. It's never enough.
But it's not just about physical things, right? There's that whole thing online with, likes and followers and trying to project this perfect image.
Social media is a big part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And it can really fuel that sense of inadequacy, that feeling that we're not good enough.
It's like we're all back in that cave trying to project the most impressive shadows onto the wall.
And in that pursuit, we lose sight of what truly matters.
Yeah.
Connection, meaning, purpose, things that go beyond the superficial.
So how do we break free from that? How do we escape that materialistic mindset? Is it even possible in today's world?
It's a challenge, I won't lie. But I think it starts with recognizing that true happiness, true fulfillment, those things don't come from outside of us. They come from within. It's about cultivating inner peace, having a sense of purpose, building genuine connections with people, not about the things we acquire.
So it's a shift in focus.
Exactly. One thing that can be really helpful is practicing gratitude. Take some time each day to appreciate the simple things you have in your life, the people you love, the experiences you've had.
The roof over your head.
Yes. Cultivating gratitude really helps us to focus on what we already have instead of constantly striving for more.
I've also heard that mindfulness practices like meditation or yoga can be helpful in this area.
Those practices can be really powerful. They help us to become more aware of our thoughts, our feelings, and to observe those cravings without judgment. It's like, you can see that craving for that new phone or that new pair of shoes, but you don't have to give in to it.
You can just observe it.
Exactly. And that gives you the space to make a more conscious choice about how you want to spend your time, your energy, your money. Instead of letting those cravings control you, it's about training our minds to see through those illusions.
To see that those things won't bring lasting happiness.
Exactly. And as we do that, we start to become less attached to material possessions and more connected to what truly matters.
It's a beautiful thing, but I know those cravings can be really persistent. Even when you understand on an intellectual level that those things won't bring you happiness, there's still that part of you that wants to be recognized, admired, accepted.
Absolutely. We're all human. We want to belong. We want to feel valued. The key is to find healthy and fulfilling ways to meet those needs. So, instead of chasing external validation, focus on developing your talents, pursuing your passions, doing things that bring you joy and make you feel good about yourself.
It's about finding your own internal compass and following that rather than letting the opinions of others dictate your course.
I love that. It's about aligning your actions with your values, with your true self. And when you do that, you'll naturally attract people who appreciate you for who you truly are. That's where real connection comes from.
That's where you find your tribe.
You got it. That community of people who support you and encourage you to be your best self. But what about the people in our lives who are, still stuck in that materialistic mindset? Do we try to show them the light? Or do we just let them figure it out on their own?
That's a tough one. I think it requires a lot of compassion and respect. You can't force anyone to change their beliefs. But you can model a different way of being. You can share your own experiences and maybe, plant a seed of doubt.
Maybe that seed will grow into something beautiful.
That's the hope. Ultimately, though, the choice is theirs.
We can just create a welcoming space for when they're ready.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe by shining our light, we can help to illuminate their path. Beautiful. Now, in our final segment, we're going to shift gears one more time and explore how Plato's allegory can guide us towards creating a more just and equitable world. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. So far, we've been exploring Plato's allegory of the cave, thinking about how it applies to our own personal journeys, like how do we break free from those limiting beliefs and those ways of seeing the world. But I think it's important to also talk about, what this allegory has to say about social justice, right? About those bigger systemic issues that we're all facing today. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's incredible how relevant this allegory remains, even after all these centuries. It gives us this powerful framework for understanding how those power dynamics that exist and how those limited perspectives that we've been talking about can actually contribute to perpetuating injustice.
So how do you see that connection? How does this allegory relate to those real world issues of social justice?
Well, let's go back to those prisoners in the cave for a second. Remember, they were chained up, only able to see those shadows projected on the wall. What if those shadows represent the dominant narratives in society? Those limited perspectives, that biased information that's often presented as the truth.
So the people in power, the ones who control the light source, so to speak, they're the ones shaping the reality that everyone else is allowed to see.
Exactly. And, just like those prisoners who mistook those shadows for reality, people can internalize those dominant narratives, even if those narratives don't actually reflect their own lived experiences.
It's like they're being told what to think, what to believe.
And often, those beliefs don't even serve them.
It's pretty disturbing when you think about it that way. And it also makes me think about that escaped prisoner, the one who went back to the cave to try to enlighten the others. Remember, he was met with disbelief, with ridicule, even threats.
Yeah, it's a powerful metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really highlights the challenges that people face when they try to speak truth to power.
It's like they're bringing that sunlight of truth into the darkness. But the people who are accustomed to the darkness, they resist it.
Because it's uncomfortable. It challenges their worldview. And sometimes it even threatens their position of power.
So if this allegory is showing us how systems of oppression can operate, what does it have to say about how we actually create a more just and equitable world? Like, what are the solutions?
Well, I think the first thing is that emphasis on critical thinking. We need to question those narratives that we're being presented with. We can't just accept things blindly. Just like that escaped prisoner had to break free from those chains and venture out of the cave, we have to be willing to challenge the status quo, to seek out those alternative perspectives.
To question everything.
Exactly. To ask those tough questions, especially about those systems that are perpetuating injustice. Who benefits from these systems? Who's being marginalized? We have to be willing to examine those power structures and to disrupt them.
Okay, so critical thinking is key. But what about the people who are still trapped in those metaphorical caves? How do we reach them? How do we help them to see the light?
That's where empathy comes in. And active listening. We need to understand that the people who are most impacted by those systems of injustice, they're often the ones who have the clearest understanding of how those systems operate. Their lived experiences, their perspectives are so valuable.
It's about centering their voices.
Exactly. It's about creating platforms for them to share their stories, their experiences. It's about shifting those power dynamics so that their voices are heard, so they have a seat at the table.
It's about recognizing their expertise.
Yes. And, it's also about acknowledging our own biases, our own limited perspectives. We need to be open to learning from others, to recognizing that we don't have all the answers. True justice, true equity, those things require a fundamental shift in how we see the world.
A shift that allows us to see through the eyes of those who have been marginalized and oppressed.
Exactly. And that's a journey that we all have to take. It's not just about those who are directly impacted by injustice.
Yeah.
Those of us who have benefited from those systems of privilege. We have a responsibility to use that privilege to dismantle those systems.
To become allies and advocates.
Yes, to amplify those voices that have been silenced, to challenge those structures that perpetuate inequity. It's not enough to just recognize our privilege. We have to actively use it to create change.
It's about taking action. But I imagine that can feel overwhelming. Like, where do you even begin?
It's true. It can feel like a daunting task. But, it's important to remember that creating a more just and equitable world is a long-term process. There's no quick fix. It's a journey, not a destination.
And just like that journey out of the cave, it takes courage, it takes perseverance, and it takes a willingness to embrace that discomfort that comes with with challenging those deeply held beliefs, those ingrained systems.
And it takes collaboration. We have to work together to support each other, to learn from each other's experiences, to celebrate those small victories along the way.
That's a good point. Celebrating those victories is important. It's so easy to get caught up in the challenges and the setbacks. We need those reminders that progress is being made, that change is possible.
And we need to recognize and appreciate the efforts of those who are working tirelessly for social justice. They're the ones who are leading the way, who are shining their light brightly, who are inspiring others to join the journey.
So, to recap, we've talked about the importance of critical thinking, empathy, amplifying marginalized voices, leveraging privilege for good, and, embracing that ongoing journey of creating a more just and equitable world. What are some final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with? What are some key takeaways from this whole conversation?
I think one of the most important things to remember is that enlightenment isn't a solo mission. Just like that escaped prisoner had to go back to the cave to share what he learned, we have a responsibility to share our knowledge, our experiences, our resources with others,
To help illuminate the path for those who are still in the darkness.
and to do it with humility, with respect,
Right.
with collaboration. True enlightenment, it's a collective effort. It's about recognizing that each of us has something valuable to contribute to creating a better world.
That's a powerful message. It's a reminder that we're all in this together, that we all have a role to play, and that together we can create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today on the deep dive and for sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Plato's Allegory of the Cave. We hope this conversation has inspired you to question, to learn, to grow, and to continue exploring these ideas in your own lives and communities. Keep shining your light, and remember, the journey is just beginning. This is the deep dive, signing off.